Hey folks, Jimmy here, aka Palette of the Dead. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the latest issue of Warhammer Age of Sigmar Stormbringer magazine. Now, as per usual with all these videos, if you like them, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and of course, drop me a comment down below. I love hearing back from you guys, it goes a massive way to helping out the channel too. Now, this week we are on issue 65, and it's a scenery issue. Now, this is a bit of scenery I do kind of like. So this is a Guardian Idol. So these are statues that are kind of basically put around the defensive perimeters of the cities of Sigmar, and they kind of utilise the geomantic energy that is kind of siphoned off by the Nexus Siphon, and they utilise that as a defensive structure. Now, it's always been a bit vague of how the defensive structure works, but it's pretty cool, and I do kind of like the mini. It's a pretty good little bit of scenery. So it's, different. So you get, there is two heads to this when I learn to speak. So there's two different heads. So you can have it with a slightly bigger helm, or you can have a smaller helm. Entirely up to you. We do get another one of these later in the magazine's run, so we will get a second one. If you want to have multiple, obviously you can have multiple. Entirely up to you. Buy extra issues, but otherwise it's a decent scenery piece, really. I do genuinely kind of like it, so yeah, it's pretty decent. So why the hell not? Now, moving on into this week's issue. First off, we are greeted by Echoes of Doom. So, rarely do the flames of war burn brighter than one faction has been wronged by another. One such conflict was between the devious Skaven and the vengeful Sylvaneth, whose righteous fury knew no bounds. So, Greyseer Skrit-At led his force through a Skaven portal known as a Norhold into the realm of life. There he slew all who stood in his way and stole the sacred soul pods that are so precious to the Sylvaneth. Now a Sylvaneth strike force has been assembled to journey to the Skaven stronghold in Akshi and destroy the interlopers and reclaim the soul pods. So this is another one where it's kind of based on some of the lore and history and such like, and the skirmishes. So with these, you used to get skirmish boxes, which would give you a couple of major minis, sometimes a brand new mini, and sometimes you'd get a few bits and pieces, and then the idea is that you utilise those to kind of crack on with everything, and you can have a battle, and it's a self-contained battle box essentially. So they did them with Carrion Empire, Feast of Bones, and a couple of others. You don't see them as often now, because I think GW have realised they're not as popular as they thought they would be. People bought them to buy the armies, and then they'd sell the army that they didn't want and such like. So it is what it is. Anywho, you do get an image obviously there of a Screaming Bell and the Lady of Vines, both really cool minis. Screaming Bell, one of my particular favourite Skaven minis. It's absolutely fantastic, really good fun, and really good fun to paint, in all honesty, so you can do some really cool stuff with it. Now, moving on to the other page, you do get a bit more information, so about how kind of everything went. So into the darkness, blood in the high snow, and clash in the caverns, because all of these fights go into different little skirmishes and such like. Anywho, moving on, we get Anatomy of a Cruboy. So this is obviously written as a first-hand documentation of an account. So the Auric foe is both brutal and cunning, but the Cruboy is cunning and most of all. I, Herman Splott, because we've had other pages written by him, I think, have dedicated these twilight years of my life to the study of the foul brutes that assail us, travelling far and wide to glean the wisdom of the ancients in such fragments as I can find. Of those that I have encountered, I have found the Cruboy to be one of the most curious. Though they too are given to the most base of desires, there is a certain foul craft to their comings and their goings. So, this is basically kind of trying to teach you that the Cruboys are very different from the other Aurics. So the Cruboys use a lot of cunning and stealth, and they're a bit more kind of skinny and sinewy and such like, and they utilise a lot of that, whereas like your hard boys and such like, the Iron Jaws and such like, they just like to smash, and they're quite brute strength and a bit more muscle bound, so a bit different. And then you got your Bone Splitters, which are just basically savage versions of the Iron Jaws, so yeah, pretty cool. You get a bit more as well, so you also get a little bit of information about the Hobgrots, so because obviously we have Hobgrot Slitters and such like as well, so they do bring those along because, yeah, why not. Then moving on, we get part of the story. So this is Deadshot. So in the mortal realms, many tales are told of mighty heroes, but even the most humble soldier can turn the tide of war. Here we find an Archanaut as he readies himself for the coming battle against the Head Knights of Slaanesh, unaware of the part he is about to play. So it genuinely is meant to be kind of true that the average soldier can take a kind of a very important part to play in any kind of battles within the Age of Sigmar and their lore and history and such like. So it's not always about your named heroes. So that's one way of looking at it anyway. So yeah, bit of information for you, and it's a little bit interesting obviously as well. And things like this can actually be kind of learned through books like Dominion and such like that. So most of the soldiers are not heroes, and the Stormcast Eternals aren't as heroic as don't come across as heroic as much as they probably should, or probably normally would in most other novels. So yeah, it's a bit interesting. So yeah, the story is pretty good though. Obviously it's a Cadron story, which is a little bit more unusual and a little bit fewer and far between, in all honesty, in the Age of Sigmar lore, but pretty cool. And you get some really nice artwork as well, which is pretty nifty and always really nice. Then moving on, we get our page for the Guardian Idols. So obviously Guardian Idols are some of the most important pieces of arcane architecture that are carried by the Dawnbringer Crusades, and they are among the first things to be erected when a new city is established. So Guardian Idols stand at the perimeter of every city of Sigmar, as I said at the beginning. Their backs to the city, they keep watch over the haunted wastelands outside the safety of the city walls. Stern, cold and imposing, mere presence of a Guardian Idol is often enough to frighten off many of Sigmar's more cowardly enemies. However, the idols are more than just lifeless statues. The city's Nexus siphons channels arcane power from the Nexus point beneath the city to the Guardians. This power then flows between each idol, forming a potent psychic barrier that holds even the most powerful supernatural forces at bay. Kind of as I say, so it works like a defensive structure that kind of can repel, say, any kind of arcane supernatural forces. So for instance, for Nighthaunt, it should be able to repel them. Then obviously you get on the other page, you get things to do, Sides of Power and Sigmar's Boon and all that type of stuff. Then we move on, we get our build guide. So the build guide is relatively straightforward because it's a piece of scenery and most of the scenery are straightforward to build. So fairly straightforward, fairly easy. Do it in subsections. So obviously, personally, do not glue that straight down onto that because then you've got to try and paint in between everything. If you are going to paint it, obviously summer in the UK is on its way. So my thing will always be, if you can, spray paint. Save yourself a load of time and effort. Spray paint, a wash, so a shade paint, so whether you're going to Aphonian Camo shade or Agrax Surf shade or Nuln Oil or anything like that, however you want to go about painting it. So if you spray it first, something like Corax White or good old Wraithbone Xandri Dust, or even if you wanted to, you could go Abaddon Black, entirely up to you. Do it in subsections first. Get your subsections done. You can add your little details later on. You can literally put a shade over it, dry brush back over it, done. Happy days. You don't have to spend a lot of time on scenery because when you're playing, you're generally not looking at the scenery. So, but otherwise, it's fairly straightforward when you've done it. Obviously, some parts of it would be brass, gold, and such like. You can do any metallics that you want if you really wanted to. Entirely up to you how you go about doing it. But when you're done, if you're following the guide, you're going to have something that looks like that. or you'll have your own interpretation of it. Personally, I will always go for my own interpretation of it, of things like this, because they look a bit more interesting and you get a little bit of uniqueness. But as this is obviously meant to be all part of one city of Sigmar, when we get the second one, do the second one in the same style. So if you're not going to paint this one straight away, put it aside, paint it up later on, and do the second one at exactly the same time, and you'll have far less problems, in all honesty. Anyway, enough rambling about painting up Guardian Idols. Obviously, we move on to our battle plan. So, battle plan for the week: Flame and Fury, Raised to the Ground. So, Raised to the Ground, you have your Order Territory standing around the Guardian Idol. You got your 4 objectives and destruction coming in from both sides. And obviously, you get to do your usual 3 heroes, 5 troops for either faction. Entirely up to how you want to go about doing it, but you get to have a bit of fun with this one, which is always pretty good. And happy days. Moving on though, we get a core tactics pull-out section. So core tactics, it does mention about spellcasting, anticipating your opponent, and shooting as well. So if we go into there, so spellcasting on that page, so all to do with how to do your dispel, selecting your spells and miscasts and such like. Obviously selecting your spells is a very kind of unique thing. It's up to you what spells you want to choose and what slots you're going to put them in. You can do it through the Warhammer Age of Sigmar app, where you can kind of build it and go through that if you wanted to. Obviously though, if you don't own all the books, like all the battle tomes, or at least the battle tomes for the army that you want, you can't really see everything that everything does, which is a bit annoying. Obviously on the other page where you got your shooting, so dual purpose roles, so whether they're shooting or kind of like a close attack, so some of them can do close attacks as well as shooting. Selecting your targets and obviously shoot and move, which can be done. And then on the inside you get a bit more information about how to anticipate your opponent. So whether this is selecting your army, knowing what your enemy's army is going to be like, your selections, deployment, your opponents and such like that through your combat and everything. Obviously you get to do a little bit of this pretty much every battle, so if you know roughly what your opponent's playing, so if you're going Stormcast Eternals and your opponent's going Cruboys, you know roughly what they might be bringing to the table, so you might be able to equip yourself that way to kind of combat their potential strategies, is the best way to put it. Anywho, that's it for that pull-out section. I'm not going to go too much more into that. Anyway, right, going on to next week. So next week is paint issue. It's Squig Orange and Wild Rider Red, both very handy for painting up your squigs to get them a bit brighter and a bit more colourful and a bit more enjoyable, because dull squigs look boring. Then issue 67, we get Stormcast Vanquishers. I really like the Stormcast Vanquishers, so I might actually have to order a second issue, maybe more, who knows. But yeah, I do really like them. You get 5 in the magazine. 5 is 1 unit, so pretty good stuff. And yeah, more Stormcast, sword wield Stormcast, which are always pretty cool. Anywho, that is it for this issue. First thing though, before I go, obviously there is a reveal for the new edition of Age of Sigmar that is going to be shown off at the Las Vegas, I think it is. So it's dead early in the morning for us Brits, so which we'll see it Friday morning from I think 1 o'clock in the morning or something stupid like that, which is, you know, way past my bedtime. But anyway, be really good stuff. There's going to be a load of interesting, so we're going to get to see get our first glimpses of what's going to be in the box and what we're going to get. And if you're really interested, you should be able to watch Celebrity Battle. So the celebrities are Kip Sapien and Claudio Castagnoli from AEW. So AEW is obviously a wrestling company. They are both wrestlers. So Kip Sapien is a British wrestler. Good old Claudio Castagnoli is the Swiss Cyborg, as he was once known, in his former role as Cesaro in WWE. But yeah, really interesting. They're going to be playing the new rules with the Spearhead style campaign. So good old Kip Sapiens playing as Skaven, Claudio is playing as Stormcast Eternals. It could be really quite interesting to watch, so if you're interested in watching how it plays, that might be up your street. Anyway, that is it from me. I'm done rambling. Thank you very, very much for watching though, and yeah, I'll see you sometime soon. Bye bye now.